dad is a man-child who likes Diary of a Wimpy Kid so much that he forces me to read it with him whenever a new book comes out. After what I had just experienced, I don't know if I want to read a Diary of a Wimpy Kid book ever again. I was walking down the street one day when I saw a Diary of a Wimpy Kid book I had never seen before. It was black and read, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Game Over. It had a picture of Greg in tears holding a gun to his head with a noose in the background on it. It listed Jeff Kinney as the author as usual, so I just assumed that it was a new release with a darker turn to it. I picked it up and took it to my dad's house, but he wasn't home, and with that I went to my room as well. I couldn't tell at the moment, but something about it didn't seem quite right, so I opened it up and read it by myself. It was a typical Wimpy Kid style drawings and text allegedly by Jeff Kinney, but something was very different from those other books in the series. Greg swore heavily in this one as opposed to the profanity-free earlier books. I don't remember every single word in the book, but I can give a synopsis. It was mainly Greg talking about how much he hates his life, how only bad things happen to him, and his desire to commit suicide. He starts taking drugs and drinking alcohol. As this goes on, the text and drawings get cruder and more low quality, as Greg is under the influence of drugs while writing and drawing in his diary. In the final day of his diary, in practically illegible writing and crude distorted drawings, Greg finds a gun that belongs to his brother Roderick. He calls up Rowley to come over, telling him that he has a surprise for him. Rowley arrives at Greg's house excitedly. A drugged up and crazed Greg takes Rowley up to his room and blindfolds him. Greg puts the gun in Rowley's mouth and shoots. Rowley dies immediately. Greg, in tears, points the gun to his own head and apparently kills himself. Real blood is visible all over the last page Greg had used, not to mention the next two. Greg was only used a third of the book, which had as many pages as any other Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. The other 2/3 of the book were blank diary pages. I felt disturbed and queasy, like I could throw up. In fact, I even did briefly. I never believed the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series would end with Greg committing a murder-suicide with Rowley. I threw the book out of the window in my dad's room into the street in front of cars, where it hopefully got ran over and destroyed. But I can't be sure. After it scarred me for life, I don't want anybody else to find it and have the same reaction I did. No decent person should have to read that horrible, scarring book. Well, I threw that book into the street. The Wimpy Kid book Game Over. Now I thought that it was ran over, but it was still intact on the ground. I picked it up, I went back into my dad's house, and then went on the internet and searched up the book. I got to its Wikipedia page, and it said that a movie would be made into the book, starring Zachary Gordon again, which I thought was a little odd, because in the Cabin Fever Christmas special, he didn't do the voice since he was getting old. The movie was released a few days later. I went to the premiere. The movie started and it cut from the Fox logo to a cartoon drawing of Greg staring emotionless at the camera. Then it morphed into a live-action version of Greg, played by Zachary Gordon. He was just sitting there. And guess what? He told us he was inspired by Princess.exe and he was going to self-mutilate himself. First, he took out a bag of morphine, shoved the entire contents into his mouth, and then swallowed it. He then grabbed a saw and did exactly what the little girl did on that Princess.exe thing. I was going to run out, but I was stopped by these disturbing security guards. They stared at me and I saw some red in their eyes, so I ran back. Greg, now half of his face sawed off already. His ear was chopped off. Blood was gushing like a waterfall onto his desk. Then it happened. The door opens and Rowley comes in. He stares at Greg, picks up a gun and randomly kills himself with it. Greg skinned himself raw now, and he wasn't finished yet. He then got some acid and pours it on his face, and his face gets eaten up graphically, as does his entire self. He's now a greenish, brownish, red, zombie-like person shriveled up. I puked so hard blood almost came out. Then he disintegrated and melted. And then the movie stopped. Everyone was still, sitting in their chairs, emotionless. They stood up, looking towards me. They started walking to me. I ran out and I was chased by these people. I opened my eyes to find myself in bed. It was all a dream. But I leaned over, and the book was beside my bedside table. In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come